The storm swallowed the city, but in one forgotten alley, destiny waited. A frail man's face was shoved into the gutter, rainwater choking his breath. I should have walked away, but my heart refused, and with one reckless step, I crossed into a story that would alter my fate forever. Rain hammered every surface of the city that night. The streets shimmered under the assault. Neon signs bent and blurred through veils of water, and the storm's growl devoured the usual sounds of honking taxis and chatter. I was 5 blocks from home, dragging a broken umbrella, when a sound cut sharper than thunder. A human thud, the ugly note of flesh colliding with metal and stone. Curiosity, or maybe something stronger, pulled me off the main road. My shoes splashed into ankle-deep puddles as I turned into a narrow alley, where a single dying street lamp sputtered. In that frail halo of yellow light, I saw him. A hulking brute in a leather jacket, his fist tangled in the collar of a man so thin, he looked like wind alone could carry him away. With a vicious shove, the brute forced him down into the rushing gutter, where filthy rainwater swallowed his mouth and nose. For a moment I froze. Any sane person would have turned back, let the storm bury the scene, let the city's cruelty continue unchecked. But then the frail man's eyes lifted, catching mine, wide, desperate, pleading, and something inside me, something that had stayed silent too long, broke loose. "Stop!" My voice ripped through the storm. The attacker turned slowly, a grin peeling across his face. His teeth gleamed yellow under the lamp. He studied me the way a predator studies prey, amused by the audacity of interruption. His boots splashed forward, each step deliberate. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my hands trembling at my sides. But fear wasn't enough to chain me. I planted my feet and forced my voice steady. "Back off." For one impossible heartbeat, the whole world stilled. The rain seemed to hang in the air. The city vanished, leaving only the 3 of us suspended in defiance. Then, with a growl, he lunged. I raised my arms instinctively, bracing for impact. His shoulder clipped mine, but on the slick stones his weight betrayed him. He stumbled, spat, then sneered. "You've got guts, kid." Behind me, the frail man coughed violently, struggling to rise. That sound alone gave me steel. My knees shook, but I held firm. "I won't walk away." The brute scowled, spat once more, and finally retreated. His boots squelched into the darkness, swallowed by the storm's mouth. I exhaled, my body suddenly heavy. Then I turned. The man in the gutter clung to the curb like a drowning sailor to driftwood. His chest heaved, lips trembling around ragged breaths. I crouched low, offering my arm. "Can you stand?" His nod was barely perceptible. I pulled him up, his frame frighteningly light beneath layers of soaked fabric. His coat gaped open, revealing a sweater, eaten by holes, denim patched and frayed, boots with soles half torn away. Yet in his eyes, behind exhaustion, behind fear, was a flicker of stubborn life. "Here," I muttered, shrugging out of my jacket and pressing it against him. "You'll freeze otherwise." He took it with trembling hands. The storm roared on, the city indifferent, but together we shuffled toward the edge of the lamplight. Each step was slow, his weight dragging against me, yet his stride refused surrender. At the circle of light, he stopped. His hand dipped into his pocket, emerging with something unexpected. A coin. Heavy. Silver. Weathered with age. Its surface bore an unfamiliar crest. A crowned lion entangled in ivy. He pressed it into my palm, curling my fingers tight around it. "It's all I have," he rasped. His voice cracked like brittle glass. "Take it. You saved me." I stared at the coin, its weight far heavier than its size. Rainwater pooled in its grooves, glinting under the weak lamp. "I don't need this," I began, but he shook his head, eyes already darting toward the mouth of the alley. From far off came the rise of sirens. Police. Ambulances. Who could say? His body stiffened. "They'll come," he whispered. "I can't stay." Before I could respond, he pulled up his hood and turned. "Wait!" I reached for his arm. He paused. Lightning forked across the sky, catching his face in its violent glow. In that frozen instant, I saw gratitude deep enough to wound, and fear sharp enough to cut. Then the storm swallowed him, his figure dissolving into shadow. I was left standing in the rain, breath ragged, hand clenched around a coin colder than ice. The alley stretched empty, but the weight in my palm told me this wasn't over. Who was he? Why was he running? And why did I feel as if I'd just stepped into a story written long before I arrived? The storm softened, but the questions only grew louder. In my hand, the silver coin gleamed with its crowned lion crest, unfamiliar yet powerful. It didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a key. I had rescued a stranger, but in truth, I sensed he had pulled me into his world. And I had no idea how deep that world would run. 2 days later, I thought the storm was behind me. But when a black sedan glided to my curb, I knew the night in the gutter hadn't ended. It had only just begun. From its polished door stepped a man who looked nothing like the frail figure I'd saved. And the moment he called my name, I realized my life was no longer my own. The morning had been ordinary. I was unloading grocery bags on my porch, shaking drizzle from my sleeves, when the quiet hum of an expensive engine cut through the neighborhood's stillness. Tires whispered against wet asphalt, and a black sedan rolled to a stop in front of my house. Its body gleamed like obsidian under the weak sunlight, sleek and deliberate. I froze, one hand on a carton of milk. Cars like this didn't belong here, certainly not on my modest street, where rusted bicycles leaned against fences and cracked sidewalks told stories of neglect. The rear door clicked open. A man emerged. He was tall, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit that looked sculpted for his frame, a deep indigo tie tucked neatly beneath a wool overcoat. His shoes shone as if polished that very morning, and even in the gray light, the glimmer of gold at his cufflinks caught my eye. But it was his gaze that pinned me where I stood. Steady, knowing. "James Mercer," he said, voice low and rich. "Do you remember me?" My throat tightened. My mind scrambled. 2 nights ago, rain, thunder, fear. I'd pulled a broken man from a gutter. His voice had been weak, his coat in tatters, his hand shaking as he pressed that strange coin into mine. And yet here stood someone entirely different, poised, commanding, every inch carved by power and wealth. I swallowed hard. I don't understand. He smiled faintly, stepping closer. "You saved me when no one else would. I came to return the favor." Before I could answer, he slipped his hand into his pocket. When it emerged, the object gleamed familiar and heavy. The same coin, the crowned lion encircled in ivy. My pulse thundered. "You kept this," he said softly. "Good, because it means you carry more than metal. You carry my gratitude." I glanced at the coin, then back at him. "Who are you?" He extended his hand with deliberate calm. "Marcus Whitfield. Some call me a philanthropist, others a billionaire. But to you, I will always be the man you refused to abandon." The name hit me like a physical force. Whitfield. I'd heard it whispered in news reports, tied to skyscrapers, foundations, and fortunes. And yet, 2 nights ago, that very same man had been shoved into a gutter, dressed like a ghost of the streets. I shook my head, still stunned. Why were you there? Why dressed like that?" A flicker of something, pain, maybe, crossed his face. He glanced at the sedan, then back at me. "Not everything can be explained in a single breath. For now, I only ask you to join me tonight. Dinner. Elmwood Manor. 8 o'clock. He pulled a cream envelope from his coat and pressed it into my hand. The wax seal bore the same crest as the coin. I stared at it, the parchment thick and expensive, my name written across the front in elegant script. My voice cracked. "I don't belong in a place like that." Marcus tilted his head. You belong exactly where courage resides. And courage is rare. That's why I chose you. The envelope burned in my palm. My shabby sweater, my cracked shoes. Everything about me screamed unworthy. And yet his eyes held no doubt, only certainty. Finally, he stepped back toward the car. I will see you tonight. The driver opened the door, and Marcus slid inside with effortless grace. The sedan purred, pulled away, and disappeared down the street, leaving nothing but silence. And me, standing frozen on my porch, clutching an invitation that felt less like dinner and more like the opening of a door to an entirely new world. I looked down at the envelope again, tracing the embossed seal. Elmwood Manor. I'd only ever heard of it in passing, a place of legend, whispered about in awe. But what did Marcus want with me? Why drag me into his orbit? The coin in my pocket felt impossibly heavy. 2 nights ago it was all he had. Today, it was a symbol that the story wasn't over. The black sedan vanished, but its echo stayed lodged in my chest. In my hand, the invitation gleamed beneath raindrops, the wax crest unbroken. Elmwood Manor, 8 o'clock. Was it gratitude or a trap that awaited me behind those gates? Either way, I knew there was no turning back. The gates creaked open as if revealing a world forbidden to ordinary eyes. Lantern light flickered across marble steps polished like mirrors. With every step, I felt the weight of crossing from survival into spectacle. And I couldn't shake the question. Why had Marcus chosen me to enter this realm? The sedan glided through the wrought iron gates as though slipping into another universe. I pressed my palm against the glass, staring wide-eyed at the sprawling estate that unfurled before me. Elmwood Manor, Marcus's sanctuary, looked less like a house and more like a kingdom. Columns rose like ivory sentinels along the grand facade, each one etched with intricate vines. Windows, tall and gleaming, spilled golden light into the dusk. Lanterns lit the sweeping driveway, their glow reflecting on marble tiles slick from the rain. To my right, a conservatory of glass sparkled like a jewel box, housing roses that climbed as if reaching for heaven itself. The car slowed to a stop at the base of the steps. My heart hammered. In my hand, I clutched the invitation Marcus had given me. The wax seal broken, but the words still sharp in my mind. Elmwood Manor. 8 o'clock. A footman in navy livery opened the door. "Miss Thompson," he said softly, bowing his head as though I were royalty. His voice carried no doubt, no hesitation, as if he expected me to belong here. But I didn't. Not in my second-hand dress, not with shoes that squeaked from the rain. My breath trembled as I stepped out, the cold marble beneath me harder, sharper than any street pavement. The doors at the top of the stairs swung open. Warmth spilled out. Golden chandeliers, velvet drapes, the shimmer of polished wood. The scent of roses drifted on the breeze, mixing with the faintest trace of incense. I hesitated at the threshold, overwhelmed by the magnitude of it all. Then, from within the shadows, Marcus appeared. Gone was the frail figure I'd pulled from the gutter. Gone, too, the sharp businessman who had arrived at my porch. Tonight, he looked something else entirely, like a man caught between power and vulnerability. His tailored suit fit him perfectly, but his eyes carried the same quiet gratitude I had seen in the storm. "Welcome to Elmwood," he said, his voice carrying warmth and command in equal measure. My throat tightened. I could barely form words. "It's overwhelming." He offered his hand, steady and patient. "Come inside. Tonight is not about appearances. It is about truth." I took his hand. It was warm, grounding, and in that moment I felt less like an intruder and more like someone being led across a threshold of fate. The foyer expanded before me in impossible grandeur. Marble floors glistened under chandeliers that hung like constellations frozen in crystal. Tapestries adorned the walls. Hunting scenes, pastoral fields, battles long forgotten. A sweeping staircase curved upward, its banister gilded, its steps carpeted in crimson velvet. As we walked deeper, Marcus spoke quietly. This manor has been in my family for generations. It has witnessed power, corruption, triumph, and tragedy. Tonight, I wanted to witness something else. A partnership built not on bloodlines or wealth, but on choice. His words sank into me like stones in water. Partnership. Choice. Why me? We turned into a dining salon unlike anything I had ever seen. Polished mahogany walls framed towering windows. A long table gleamed under candlelight, set for only two. Crystal glasses sparkled, and fine china sat perfectly aligned upon embroidered linen. At the center, orchids and ivy twined together, their fragrance heady, intoxicating. I sank into the chair Marcus pulled for me, my palms damp against the carved wood. He took his seat across, his gaze never leaving mine. For a moment, silence stretched, intimate, daunting. "Why bring me here?" I finally whispered. His lips curved in something between a smile and a sigh. "Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten. That courage is not born in wealth or privilege, but in the moment someone decides not to look away." The memory of that storm night rushed back. The gutter, the thug, the coin. My pulse quickened. "But I don't belong in this world," I said softly. "You belong wherever your courage takes you," Marcus replied. His eyes burned with quiet conviction. "And courage has brought you here." I gripped the edge of the table, my doubt warring with a rising spark inside me. Could it be true? That one act of defiance had carried me from a rain-slick alley to the heart of Elmwood Manor? The candles flickered, shadows dancing across Marcus's face. His tone shifted, lower, heavier. "Tonight is only the beginning, Miss Thompson. What I will ask of you will change not only your destiny, but the lives of countless others." The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing sparks into the silence. Marcus leaned closer, eyes steady, voice sharpened by promise and mystery. "What I share tonight will demand more than courage. It will demand trust." My breath caught as I realized. This dinner was not about gratitude. It was about a choice that would bind my fate to his forever. The silver spoon trembled in my hand as he spoke, not of gratitude, but of empires. Every word stripped away the image of a helpless man in the gutter. Candlelight revealed not weakness, but power veiled in silence. And for the first time I wondered, had I saved him, or had he chosen to be found? The dining salon glowed with golden warmth, every flicker of the candles painting shadows that danced across polished mahogany. I lifted the spoon to my lips, tasting the briny luxury of caviar for the first time, its sharp saltiness exploding against my tongue. It felt alien, indulgent, a far cry from the lukewarm coffee and stale bread I usually lived on. Across from me, Marcus leaned forward, his tuxedo cut perfectly against his broad frame. His eyes weren't on the food, though. They were fixed on me, as if measuring my reaction not just to the meal, but to the world he was slowly pulling me into. "Do you enjoy it?" he asked. I set the spoon down, my hand unsteady. "It's unlike anything I've ever had." He smiled faintly, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. Instead, he leaned back, folding his hands, and spoke words that chilled me despite the fire's warmth. "Food, wealth, luxury, they're masks. They please the senses, but they hide the truth." He paused, gaze heavy. "The truth is simpler. Power is lonely." The words hung in the air, heavier than the chandeliers above us. I blinked. "Lonely?" He nodded. "When my parents died, I inherited everything. The company, the foundations, the estates. But what I didn't inherit was purpose. For years I walked boardrooms and gala halls, everyone smiling, everyone bowing, but no one seeing me. Not really." His voice dropped lower, almost confessional. "That's why I left Elmwood that night. Why I dressed in rags. Why I put myself in danger. I wanted to remember what it meant to be vulnerable. to strip away the mask. The stormy alley replayed in my mind. The thug, the gutter, the frail figure. My breath caught. So, you chose that? You chose to risk your life? His eyes flickered with something raw, almost regret. I didn't expect the violence, but I needed to know if anyone anywhere would look past the disguise and still see me as human. And I did, I whispered, the realization settling like a stone in my stomach. He nodded. You didn't turn away. You didn't ask for my name, my fortune, my reputation. You just acted. His hand brushed the edge of the table. That is why I trust you now. The fire snapped in the hearth, sparks breaking the silence. I gripped my glass of champagne, watching golden bubbles climb to the surface. My pulse thudded in my ears. This wasn't just gratitude. This was something deeper, more dangerous. Marcus, I said softly, what exactly do you want from me? Instead of answering, he gestured. A footman entered, carrying a leather-bound portfolio embossed with the Whitfield crest. He placed it on the table and slipped out without a word. Marcus slid it toward me. Open it. I hesitated, then lifted the cover. Inside, page after page of photographs stared back at me. Images of orphanages transformed into bright schools, factories turned into art spaces, scholarships given to children who once had nothing. Every project bore the stamp of the Whitfield Foundation. These are yours, I breathed. Ours, he corrected, if you'll join me. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. Each one was a story of rebirth, of lives changed. But beneath the inspiration was a terrifying question. What role did he expect me to play in this empire? I don't understand, I admitted. I'm not like you. I don't have wealth or influence. He leaned forward, his gaze locking onto mine with unwavering intensity. You have something rarer. Vision. Integrity. You stood in the rain when others walked by. That's the kind of strength money can't buy. I shook my head, doubt gnawing at me. But why me? Because, he said quietly, I've built monuments of glass and steel, but without someone like you, they're just shells. Empty. I don't need another business partner, Ava. I need someone who will remind me what all of this is for. The portfolio lay heavy between us. My heart raced, caught between awe and fear. I had entered Elmwood as a guest, but now I sat at a crossroads. Marcus's hand slid across the table, resting lightly atop mine. His touch was warm, grounding, but it carried the weight of a promise and a demand. This is not just about my life, he said. It's about yours. If you say yes tonight, you will never be ordinary again. The room seemed to shrink around me, the chandeliers blurring, the candles dimming, until all that remained was his voice and the pounding of my heart. He pressed the portfolio closer, eyes never leaving mine. One choice, he said, voice low and unwavering, and your destiny changes forever. The fire hissed, as if echoing his words. I stared at the pen beside the contract, my hand trembling above it. Was I ready to step into his world? Or had I already crossed the line the moment I saved him in the rain? The contract lay before me, its golden seal glimmering under the chandelier's glow. One stroke of a pen could erase every struggle I had ever known. But power always comes with a price, and I wasn't sure whose script I was stepping into. Was this the beginning of freedom, or the end of myself? The study of Elmwood Manor felt more like a courtroom than a room for quiet reading. Heavy bookshelves towered around me, their leather spines gleaming under amber light. A grandfather clock ticked in the corner, each chime a reminder that time was slipping through my fingers. And in front of me, on a polished mahogany desk, sat the document that could rewrite everything I had ever been. The folio was bound in deep burgundy leather, its edges embossed in gold. My name was written inside, Ava Thompson, etched in ink beside his, Marcus Whitfield. Together, beneath the ornate header, the words "Partnership Agreement" stared back at me. My breath hitched. I wasn't just reading paper. I was staring at the possible death of my ordinary life. Marcus stood at the far side of the desk, hands folded neatly, his expression calm, but unreadable. He might as well have been carved from the same marble that built his manor. "Read it carefully," he said. His tone wasn't commanding, but it carried weight. "This isn't a formality. It's a choice, a commitment." I swallowed hard and flipped through the pages. Clause after clause leapt out at me. Equity stakes, creative control, profit sharing, arbitration. My eyes blurred, but a single phrase cut deeper than all the legalese. Co-founder. Co-founder. I leaned back, hands trembling. "Marcus." "Why me?" His gaze softened, but only slightly. "Because you see what others overlook. Because courage guided you into that storm. Because ordinary lives are built on fear, and you refused to be ordinary the moment you stepped forward." I stared at the pen resting on the desk. Sleek, gold-plated, heavy with expectation. Signing would mean stepping into his empire, his boardrooms, his vision, his battles. It would mean leaving behind the comfort of invisibility, the safety of small dreams. I thought of my mother, her hands raw from endless shifts, telling me to never stop dreaming. I thought of the children who had pressed against the broken windows of their failing schools, waiting for someone to notice them. And I thought of that night in the alley, the coin pressed into my palm, its cold weight a silent promise. Marcus's voice broke through my thoughts. "You don't have to sign. You can walk away. Live the life you had before. But if you do—" He paused, his eyes piercing mine. "If you do, the doors you open tonight may never open again." My chest tightened. Fear and exhilaration warred within me. I reached for the pen. Its weight settled into my hand like destiny itself. The tip hovered above the signature line, my name already printed neatly, waiting for me to give it flesh and permanence. I closed my eyes. Images flickered in the darkness. Rain-slick streets, laughter of children, Marcus's steady hand pulling me into his world. And then I pressed the pen down. The ink flowed in golden shimmer across the page, each letter sealing my fate. AVA. The final stroke of the N felt like a door slamming shut, and another bursting wide open. When I lifted the pen, my hand shook, but the signature remained steady, unyielding, final. The contract was no longer just his. It was ours. Marcus stepped forward, closing the folio with a soft snap. The sound echoed louder than any thunderstorm I'd ever heard. He looked at me, pride flickering in his eyes. "Welcome," he said simply. "You've just signed away the ordinary." The words sank into me like fire and ice. A strange calm washed over me, followed swiftly by a storm of questions. What had I truly agreed to? What price would come with this new name? Co-founder? The grandfather clock chimed midnight. Outside, lightning slashed across the sky, illuminating the gardens below in a brief electric flash. Marcus raised a glass of champagne, handing me another. "To new beginnings," he said. I lifted mine, the crystal trembling in my grasp. "To new beginnings," I echoed, though my heart whispered something else entirely. To unknown endings. As the champagne touched my lips, the manor shuddered under a roll of thunder. The contract sat sealed on the desk, my name glowing under candlelight. But in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling I had signed more than a partnership. I had signed my fate. Marcus's eyes lingered on me, unreadable, as though he already knew what storms awaited. And I realized, the ink was dry, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. The black sedan purred at the manor gates like a beast waiting to devour me. Inside, velvet and leather promised comfort, but outside, the city waited with claws. Every mile we drove pulled me further from the life I knew, deeper into a future I hadn't chosen. And with each turn of the wheels, I wondered, had I signed onto destiny, or a trap I couldn't escape? Dawn crept over Elmwood Manor, painting the limestone walls in pale gold. The gardens shimmered with dew, each rose trembling as though bowing to the rising sun. Yet I barely noticed their beauty. My mind was on the car idling just beyond the wrought iron gates, the sleek black sedan that symbolized the journey ahead. The driver held the door open. Inside, velvet-lined seats gleamed, polished wood panels reflecting faint streaks of light. I hesitated, my fingers brushing the edge of the doorframe. Crossing into this car felt like crossing a threshold no return could undo. Marcus appeared beside me, his coat draped casually over one arm, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. "Come," he said simply, his tone neither command nor request. Something heavier. I slid inside. The leather hugged me. The door closed with a muffled click, and the outside world disappeared behind tinted glass. For a moment, silence pressed down, broken only by the soft hum of the engine as the sedan rolled forward. We left Elmwood's manicured lawns behind. Towers of glass and concrete rose in the distance, the city awakening. My heart clenched as I thought of the streets I used to walk, the cracked sidewalks, the leaky roofs, the corner cafe where I had once sketched dreams on napkins. That life already felt like someone else's story. Marcus leaned back, studying me. "Our first stop is Brookhaven," he said, "a community center long forgotten. Today, we begin its rebirth." The words made my pulse quicken. This wasn't theoretical anymore. Blueprints and contracts were one thing, but now we were stepping into reality, into people's lives. The car pulled up in front of a sagging brick building with boarded windows and faded paint. Volunteers clustered under the awning, huddling against the chill. Children played nearby, their laughter sharp against the silence of neglect. I stepped out, clutching the rolled blueprint Marcus handed me. The volunteers turned, eyes widening, not at him, but at me. Their gazes carried something heavier than curiosity, hope, skepticism, expectation. I swallowed hard. My voice shook but didn't falter. "Good morning. I'm Ava Thompson. This is Marcus Whitfield. We're here to transform this place into something worthy of the people who call it home." A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Some smiled, some frowned. All waited. Marcus gestured for me to continue. His silence was deliberate. He wanted me to lead. I unfurled the blueprint, the paper trembling in the breeze. Bright colors lit the page. Red for a drama hall, yellow for art studios, green for rooftop gardens. As I explained the plans, voices rose in awe and disbelief. One woman stepped forward, tears glistening. "We've prayed for years that someone would care," she whispered. Her words pierced me deeper than any contract clause ever could. Marcus spoke briefly, promising resources and crews, but then stepped back again, letting me answer the questions. Budget concerns, safety measures, design details. With each reply, I felt my voice grow steadier, stronger. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about them. By noon, construction crews had arrived, tools clattering against rusted metal. I walked through the skeletal halls with the foreman, pointing to beams, windows, flooring. Terms I had once studied in books now left my mouth with conviction. Load-bearing, thermal insulation, reclaimed wood for sustainability. The foreman nodded with respect. "You've thought of everything." But inside, I wondered, had I? As dusk fell, the skeletal building looked different. New boards covered broken windows. Temporary heaters hummed against the chill. The laughter of children echoed faintly, drawn by curiosity and the first signs of change. I leaned against the doorway, exhaustion tugging at me. My hands were dirty, my coat smudged with dust, but my chest swelled with something fierce. Purpose. Marcus joined me, his expression unreadable but his eyes warm. "This is the first stone," he said quietly. "The cornerstone of everything we'll build." I turned, the blueprint still clutched in my hand, smudged now with rain and ink. "And whose name will that cornerstone bear?" I asked softly. His smile flickered in the shadows. Yours. The moon rose over Brookhaven, silver light spilling across the battered building, now breathing with new life. In my hand, the blueprint trembled, not with doubt, but with the weight of futures unseen. Marcus's words echoed. The cornerstone will bear your name. But a question burned in me like fire. Did his promise mean empowerment or ownership? And as the sedan pulled away, I realized my answer would shape everything that came next. The steam rising from my cup felt heavier than the storm outside. Across the table, Marcus wasn't just offering coffee. He was offering secrets. Each word he spoke poured like dark roast into my veins, rich with warning and promise. And I realized this was no casual meeting. This was an initiation. Elmwood's private cafe wasn't like the bustling diners I grew up in. It was quiet, pristine, drenched in sunlight pouring through glass walls that framed the gardens outside. Minimalist oak tables gleamed beneath golden rays, and the hum of the espresso machine blended with the faint rustle of pages from patrons reading the morning papers. Marcus sat at the far end, waiting. A carafe of freshly brewed Ethiopian roast rested before him, steam spiraling into the air like smoke from a ritual fire. His blazer was draped neatly over the chair beside him, his sleeves rolled up just enough to make him look both refined and disarmed. Sit, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. I slid into place, my hands trembling slightly. The barista appeared, setting a porcelain cup in front of me. Marcus motioned for me to pour. The liquid streamed in slow spirals, dark amber glistening, filling the cup with both aroma and tension. I lifted it to my lips, inhaling deeply. The taste burst across my tongue, zesty citrus followed by a soft floral sweetness, fading into earthy richness. My eyes widened. It's extraordinary. Marcus smiled faintly. Coffee is more than drink. Its origin, process, patience. Leadership is no different. He tapped a leather journal lying open on the table. Inside were sketches of beans, notes in neat script, and words underlined twice. Resilience. Vision. Trust. Tell me, he said, leaning forward. What soil shaped you? What storms made you? The question hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened. Images of my childhood cafe flickered, my mother's cracked hands grinding beans by hand, late nights balancing unpaid bills, afternoons sketching dreams I never thought would leave paper. I spoke quietly, but firmly. I grew up above a cafe that never turned anyone away. My mother taught me compassion when she poured coffee for those who couldn't pay, and she taught me resourcefulness when she patched leaking pipes with scrap tin. That's the soil I grew from. Marcus listened intently, his pen scratching notes. He wrote a single word across the page. Integrity. Then he began to speak. Stories of failed projects, of foundations that collapsed not because of money, but because of arrogance. I once funded a clinic without consulting the community, he admitted. It sat empty, unused. Millions wasted, because I didn't listen. His gaze hardened. Good intentions aren't enough. Impact requires humility. The weight of his words settled over me. I thought back to the blueprint at Brookhaven, to the hopeful eyes of volunteers. Could I balance vision with humility? Could I carry the burden of so many lives? Marcus pushed a folded napkin toward me, a pen balanced on top. Write your mission. One line. No speeches, no decoration, just truth. My hand shook as I wrote. Empower communities through design that uplifts voices and fosters belonging. He read it, then added 2 words in his steady script beneath mine. Equitable futures. I stared at the phrase, my heart racing. It was perfect. Clear, bold, alive. My mission was no longer mine alone. It was ours. The cafe's door opened, a gust of wind swirling in. Rain began to tap against the glass, soft but insistent. Marcus closed the journal and tucked the napkin inside. Now, he said, his voice low, steady, and certain. We test that mission. I blinked. Test? He nodded. Brookhaven Elementary. Their foundation is collapsing. They don't need promises. They need us. Now. My pulse surged. This wasn't a lecture. It was a summons. We rose together. The barista watched in silence, as though knowing this cafe wasn't just about coffee today. It was about baptism. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder, guiding me toward the door. Outside, a black SUV waited. Its engine hummed like a beast ready to charge. Staff members handed Marcus a slim case of documents, while another offered me a raincoat. I clutched the folded napkin in my pocket, its ink already smudged, but its meaning unshakable. As I slid into the SUV, Marcus's voice cut through the rain, sharp and certain. Now, Ava, let's see if your courage can hold when walls are crumbling. The SUV sped through the storm, wipers thrashing against sheets of rain. In my pocket, the napkin manifesto pulsed like a heartbeat. Brookhaven loomed ahead, broken, waiting, desperate. I glanced at Marcus, his expression unreadable, his jaw set. And I realized, the test wasn't about buildings, it was about me. The school stood before us like a wounded giant, bricks crumbling, windows shattered. Marcus rolled up his sleeves, not as a billionaire, but as a man ready to fight decay with his bare hands. My chest tightened as I realized this wasn't about designs on paper anymore. This was about loyalty. To him, to the mission, and to the children waiting inside. The SUV's tires crunched to a halt on broken gravel. Brookhaven Charity School loomed ahead, its facade weary from years of neglect. The once bright red bricks were dulled to rust. The windows, patched with plastic sheets, flapped against the wind. Above the playground, a single swing dangled, rust-streaked, its creak a haunting echo of joy, long forgotten. I stepped out into the chill air, my breath fogging instantly. Teachers clustered near the doorway, their shawls pulled tight, their faces a mix of worry and skepticism. Behind cracked panes, children's eyes peered out, hopeful yet wary, like birds too used to storms. Marcus didn't hesitate. He strode forward, polished shoes splashing into puddles without a care. At the threshold, he paused, scanning the building like a surgeon assessing a patient on the brink. Then he did something I'll never forget. He rolled up his sleeves, exposing strong forearms dusted with faint scars. His voice was steady, commanding. This place isn't broken. It's waiting. Let's begin. Inside, the damage was worse. Ceiling tiles sagged, water stains spreading like ink across the plaster. The old radiator hissed weakly, failing to warm even the front row of desks. Splintered wood crunched beneath our steps. A teacher whispered, "Every winter we pray the roof holds." Marcus knelt, pried open a floorboard, and revealed rotting beams below. "Unsafe," he muttered, his jaw tight. Then he pulled out his phone and made a single call. Within minutes, vans rumbled up outside. Contractors, builders, electricians. Men in hard hats streamed through the doors, their tool belts clattering. Marcus's words sliced the air like steel. "By sundown, I want temporary shelters up. Board these windows. Stabilize the floors. Portable heaters in every room. These children will not freeze another night." The contractors snapped to attention, galvanized by his certainty. Then their eyes flicked to me. One asked, "And you, ma'am, you're with him?" For a moment my throat locked. I was used to blueprints and sketches, not on-the-ground chaos. But Marcus's gaze landed on me, steady, expectant. I nodded, forcing steel into my voice. "I'll coordinate designs and logistics. Every partition, every safety measure. It goes through me." And just like that, the weight of responsibility slammed onto my shoulders. The day blurred into hammer strikes and sawdust clouds. I mapped temporary classrooms in abandoned offices, measured spaces for insulation, chose tarp colors sturdy enough to withstand winter winds. I placed heaters strategically, balancing warmth with fire safety. Every decision felt monumental, every misstep potentially catastrophic. Children pressed their faces to the glass, watching as boards went up and lights flickered on. I caught a boy pointing at me. "That's the lady from the car," he whispered. My cheeks burned. They weren't watching Marcus. They were watching me. By dusk, miracles had taken shape. 2 classrooms were insulated, windows covered, floors reinforced. Electric heaters hummed, casting warmth into spaces that had known only cold despair. The children stepped inside cautiously, eyes wide. A hush fell, followed by the softest sound. A laugh. A laugh of comfort, not survival. Tears pricked my eyes. For the first time, they weren't trapped in a crumbling building. They were safe. Marcus appeared at my side, his shirt streaked with dust, his hair damp from rain. He looked at me, and for once there was no distance of billionaire and apprentice, just 2 people who refused to give up. "This," he said softly, gesturing to the glowing classroom, "is leadership. Not titles, not speeches, just action." I swallowed hard, nodding. I see that now. But before relief could settle, Marcus drew me aside into the darkened hallway. His voice dropped low, cutting through the quiet. "Ava, I need to know something. Do you believe in this cause? Not for me, not for appearances, but for yourself." The question hit like a thunderclap. His eyes searched mine, piercing and relentless. Behind him, I could hear the faint laughter of children in newly warmed rooms. Ahead of me stretched a path I hadn't fully grasped until this moment. Was I here because fate shoved me into a stormy alley that night? Or because deep down, I was ready to devote my life to something bigger than my dreams? My answer would decide more than my loyalty to him. It would decide whether I truly belonged on this journey. The last nail hammered into place echoed down the hall. Marcus's hand rested on the wall beside me, his gaze unyielding. "Do you believe in this as much as I do?" he asked. My pulse thundered, the weight of children's futures pressing against my chest. And I knew, whatever I said next would define not only my destiny, but theirs. The email arrived like a midnight thunderclap, urgent, impossible, and aimed straight at me. Numbers, forecasts, projections, words that could build or bury our dream. The board demanded answers by dawn, and my hands shook over the keyboard. That night, I realized destiny wasn't only forged in alleys, it was also tested in spreadsheets. The apartment was silent, except for the hum of my laptop. Outside, the city slept, its neon glow muted by the fog of early dawn. Inside, the screen's white light seared my tired eyes. At the top of my inbox blinked a single subject line. Final projections required. 9 a.m. My heart seized. The board wanted numbers. Hard numbers. Costs, revenue, sustainability indexes. Everything Marcus and I had pitched in sweeping ideals. They wanted proven in cold, quantifiable lines. I had faced storms, thugs, collapsing schools. But never this. My world had always been sketchbooks and lines of imagination, not balance sheets and ROI. Yet here I was, staring down cells and formulas as though they were battlegrounds. I rubbed my temples, whispering to myself, "You've built shelters out of tarps, guided construction crews, inspired children. This is just another blueprint. Only, the walls are made of numbers." The spreadsheet glared back at me, empty. My throat tightened. What if I failed? What if, after everything, the board pulled their funding and the dream died before it truly began? My gaze drifted to the photo taped beside my desk. My mother, her face lit with weary pride as she brewed coffee in her tiny cafe. She had always told me, dreams don't survive on hope alone. You have to give them structure. I inhaled sharply and began typing. Rent, staff, utilities. The numbers added up with frightening speed. $54,000 overhead per month. Supplies, outreach, program costs, another $28,000. My chest tightened as the total surged past $80,000. For a moment, despair clawed at me. No cafe sales or art grants could sustain that forever. But then, I remembered Marcus's words. Believe in the work. Believe in yourself. I shifted from costs to revenue. Grants, $20,000 confirmed. Sponsorship pledges, $30,000 potential. Community cafe, modest but steady. My fingers flew across the keys, formulas stitching hope into graphs. Slowly the red dipped into green. The deficit became growth. A line graph climbed. Hesitant at first, then steady, promising break-even by the third month. I almost cried at the sight, not because it was perfect, but because it was alive. But the board didn't want survival. They wanted metrics, proof that compassion could be measured. I scrolled through survey notes from Brookhaven. My daughter finally smiles. This place makes me belong. It saved me. They weren't numbers, but they were gold. I created a new column, qualitative impact. For every voice I gave weight. For every story, I gave space. Still doubt whispered. What if they laugh? What if they call this amateur? I pushed the thought aside and turned to Marcus's journal notes. 5 pillars glared back at me. Integrity, innovation, inclusion, inspiration, investment. They weren't jargon. They were a framework. I drafted the 5 Pillars Index, mapping community feedback into metrics. 138% inclusion. 4 new initiatives for innovation. Scholarships funded. Employment growth. At last, the deck was ready. Charts and quotes, projections and dreams, all bound in a PowerPoint that felt like my soul compressed into slides. The clock read 5:45 a.m. I uploaded the file to the board portal. Each percentage tick of the progress bar was a heartbeat. At 100%, I exhaled so sharply I almost toppled from my chair. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Proud of you. See you at 7. I slumped forward, exhaustion crashing into relief. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe I had passed the test, but destiny rarely lets you breathe for long. At 6:10 a.m., another email pinged. The subject, Board Approval, Conditional. My pulse spiked. Hands trembling, I clicked it open. Approval glared back at me, but beneath it, in the thicket of legalese, 3 words cut through like a blade. Equity stake requirement. I froze. My share. My name. My freedom. The board wasn't just approving. They were demanding a price. And if I signed, it wouldn't just be numbers on a screen. It would be my life, bound to theirs, forever. The screen glowed with those 3 words, an ultimatum hidden in fine print. Sigh, chest burned as I realized the dream I fought for came with chains. Equity stake, partnership or surrender, freedom or future. Marcus's faith in me felt heavy, and the children's laughter echoed in my memory. And in that breathless silence, I knew. One choice could change everything. The oak doors swung open, and 100 eyes turned like spotlights. My nameplate gleamed, co-founder and creative director, but respect had yet to be earned. Every face studied me, some curious, some skeptical, all expectant. One wrong word, and the future we'd built in sweat and storms could collapse in silence. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and power. Rows of dark suits framed the semicircle table, their pens poised like daggers, their expressions unreadable masks. Above us, a chandelier spilled cold light across contracts stacked neatly in front of each member. I hesitated at the threshold for a heartbeat, then inhaled sharply and stepped inside. Marcus trailed just behind me, his presence calm, steady, commanding without a single word. He spoke first. Everyone, this is Ava Martin, visionary architect, and the woman whose courage saved my life when no one else would. The room shifted. A ripple of polite applause rolled across the table, some genuine, some begrudging. I forced myself to sit straighter, ignoring the fire in my cheeks as I took my seat at the long table. My nameplate glared back. Ava Martin, co-founder. It felt surreal. A few months ago, I was sketching dreams in a cafe corner. Now I sat among titans of industry, tasked with defending those very dreams against scrutiny sharper than any storm. I clicked the remote, and the first slide bloomed across the massive screen. Elmwood Initiatives, Design with Purpose. My voice steadied, though my palms dampened against the clicker. Good morning. When Marcus and I first crossed paths, I was nothing more than an artist with blueprints drawn by candlelight. Today, I stand here to prove that compassion and design are not luxuries. They are necessities. This board holds the resources to turn vision into lifelines, and that begins now. Silence, then the rustle of papers. Faces leaned in. I advanced to the next slide. Renderings of converted warehouses transformed into vibrant hubs. Rooftop gardens glowing in the sunlight. Atriums filled with laughter. Murals alive with children's hands. This is Project Horizon, I said, passion rising. Safe spaces, sustainable design, economic engines for underserved neighborhoods. Not buildings, but bridges, between isolation and community. One director raised a hand, voice clipped. Beautiful art, but what about return? You're asking us to invest millions. I met his gaze head on. Returns aren't just financial, they're generational. We've modeled revenue through cafe leases, workshop rentals, and partnerships. Projected break-even, 18 months. Net social ROI, measurable increases in education, employment, and income. I clicked again. Charts appeared. Bars, graphs, metrics. The air thickened with focus. A woman in pearls leaned forward. And governance? Who controls these spaces once built? I didn't flinch. Not us alone. Community ownership clauses are embedded in each contract. Locals hold seats at the table. Profits cycle back into micro-grants for residents. These hubs belong to the people they serve. Murmurs of approval rippled. Pens scratched notes. For the first time, eyes softened. Another director spoke, this one from private equity. And replication? Can this model scale beyond Brookhaven? Yes, I replied firmly. We've built a modular toolkit, designs adaptable to any city block, calibrated to local needs. Elmwood isn't a one-time miracle, it's a blueprint for global change. Question after question came, sharp as knives. Risk mitigation, crisis funds, political shifts. Each answer I gave felt like building a tower, foundation steady, brick by brick. And with each nod, each note scribbled, the tower grew taller. Finally, the silver-haired chair leaned back, his voice the weightiest of them all. Ms. Martin, one question remains. Can you deliver this? On time, on budget, under scrutiny. The room hushed. Dozens of eyes pinned me like a hawk pins prey. I placed my palms flat on the table, grounding myself in every moment that had led here. The rain-soaked alley, the coin in my pocket, the laughter of children stepping into newly warmed classrooms. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Watch me. The silence broke like glass. Applause, genuine this time, spread around the table. Even the skeptics leaned back, conceding with faint smiles. Marcus gave me a small nod of pride, the kind that said, "You've arrived." For a fleeting second, I let relief wash through me. But destiny is never content to rest. My phone buzzed on the table. A message flashed on screen. Emergency, site inspection, structural concern, immediate. My chest tightened. Already our first project was trembling under the weight of reality. The boardroom's applause faded as my phone glowed with the warning. Marcus caught my eye across the table, his expression steel. Go, his gaze said, without words. This is the real test. I rose, straightened my jacket, and felt the weight of every promise on my shoulders. Dreams had passed the board, but now, on the ground, they faced their first storm. The spotlight hit me like a tidal wave, and 1,000 faces waited in breathless silence. Beside me, Marcus stood steady, the projector glowing with a blueprint of futures not yet built. This wasn't just a presentation, it was a battlefield of belief. One misstep, and the movement we'd fought for could die before it even began. The stage floor thrummed beneath my heels as I stepped forward, heart drumming to the rhythm of anticipation. The Elmwood Innovation Summit was no ordinary gathering. It was a crucible. Rows of civic leaders, philanthropists, and investors leaned in, notebooks poised, cameras rolling. This was the moment where sketches on napkins either soared into reality or were dismissed as pretty dreams. I cleared my throat, my voice amplified across the cavernous hall. Good evening. My name is Ava Martin, co-founder and creative director of Elmwood Initiatives. The title still felt surreal on my tongue, but tonight it had to carry weight. Behind me, the projector flickered to life, revealing sweeping images of transformation. Broken schools reborn into sanctuaries of color, derelict factories glowing as art studios, city blocks once neglected, now pulsing with community. The audience gasped softly, the sound like oxygen feeding a fire. Our mission is simple, I continued, my tone steadying. Design that doesn't just shelter bodies, but heals souls. Every wall, every garden, every corner we create is meant to remind people, you matter. Marcus stepped forward, his deep voice a counterbalance to my fire. And design alone is not enough. These spaces must sustain themselves. That's why we integrate business models into every blueprint. Cafes, workshops, artisan markets. Each hub becomes an engine that fuels its own survival. Slides shifted, pie charts, projections, and stories side by side. A pottery studio funding school lunches. A rooftop farm lowering food insecurity. A mural program reducing dropout rates. It wasn't just theory. It was proof that compassion could pay dividends. A ripple of whispers spread. Some leaned forward with curiosity, others with caution. I could almost hear their doubts. Can art truly change economics? Can dreams survive reality? I clicked the next slide, revealing 5 new initiatives. My pulse quickened as the spotlight burned hotter. First, the Artisan Accelerator, residencies for creators who will train and employ local youth. Second, pop-up community hubs, bringing culture and connection to empty storefronts. Third, the Elmwood Scholarship Fund, sending young architects from underserved neighborhoods into labs worldwide. The audience stirred, the hum growing louder. Marcus took over seamlessly. Fourth, the Mentor Caravan, a traveling team that sets up shop in forgotten towns, ensuring no place is left behind. And fifth, the Elmwood Fellowship, embedding the next generation of visionaries in global think tanks so they return with solutions shaped by the world itself. A wave of applause burst out, tentative at first, then swelling. The momentum was ours. But then the questions came, sharp as blades. A stern voice rose from the front row. How will you evaluate impact? Stories are beautiful, but numbers drive funding. I met her gaze without flinching. Impact is tracked through our Elmwood Index, a 5-pillar system: inclusion, innovation, integrity, investment, and inspiration. Every hub is measured against real outcomes: attendance rates, income increases, program retention. This isn't charity, it's accountability. Another voice cut in. And risk. What happens if a hub fails? Marcus stepped in, his tone like tempered steel. Then it is rebuilt. Failure isn't an ending, it's iteration. Our contracts ensure continuity. Our reserves guarantee survival. We don't abandon communities. The tension broke like dawn. Heads nodded, pens scribbled. For the first time, I saw not skepticism, but belief flicker in their eyes. When the final slide faded, the hall erupted into applause. Some stood. Cameras flashed. Investors surged toward the stage. Behind the curtain, our team embraced, their faces alight with triumph. I turned to Marcus, breathless. We did it. He gave a small, knowing smile. No, he said softly. We've only lit the fuse. From his coat, he withdrew a crisp envelope, its seal marked urgent. He placed it in my hand, his expression unreadable. Cedar Heights, he whispered. Flood damage. Families displaced. They need us tomorrow. I tightened my grip on the envelope. My chest pounded with adrenaline and dread. The summit's glow was still fresh, but destiny was already calling us to the next battlefield. As I broke the envelope seal, the words leapt out. Emergency relief required. Immediate mobilization. The applause behind us faded, replaced by the phantom roar of floodwaters. Marcus's gaze locked with mine. Steady, unyielding, daring me to step into the storm. This was no longer about speeches or slides. Tomorrow we would discover if our shared vision could withstand the weight of disaster. The ribbon trembled between my fingers as the mayor raised the scissors. Children pressed against the fence, their laughter like bells waiting to ring. Beside me, Marcus nodded once, calm, proud, unreadable. This wasn't just an opening ceremony. It was the proof that destiny can be rebuilt, brick by brick. The sun poured gold across the courtyard, catching the bright paint on the school's new walls. Balloons bobbed in the breeze, cameras clicked, and the crowd swelled with anticipation. Teachers stood shoulder to shoulder with volunteers, their eyes glistening as though this moment belonged to them all. I held the oversized scissors with both hands. The ribbon, a stretch of crimson silk, gleamed under the light. For a second, my vision blurred, and I saw another ribbon, rainwater spilling down an alley, a silver coin pressed into my palm by a stranger. That night had started this journey, and today, its echoes returned in the form of hope reborn. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor announced, this school was once a shell of neglect. Today, thanks to Elmwood initiatives, it becomes a beacon. The crowd erupted in cheers. The children shouted louder, their voices high and unrestrained. I blinked back tears as I raised the scissors higher. With a swift snip, the silk fell, and the gates opened. C'est toi. Children surged inside, their shoes clattering across the polished floors, their laughter rising in joyous echoes. Murals stretched across the walls, trees bursting with blossoms, books transforming into wings, hands of every shade, clasped in unity. Every brushstroke whispered the story of resilience. One little girl tugged at my sleeve, thrusting a card into my hand. It was handmade, glitter glued along the edges. In crooked letters, it read, "Thank you for giving us light." My throat tightened. I crouched to meet her eyes. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Thank you for reminding me why we fight." Behind me, Marcus spoke with the press, his words smooth but his gaze occasionally flicking to me, steady, reassuring. When the cameras dimmed, he walked over, his presence commanding even in silence. From his coat, he produced a small velvet box. "Open it," he said softly. Inside lay the coin, no longer tarnished, but gleaming with a fresh gold inlay. Our initials, entwined, were etched into its surface. I traced the crown and ivy with trembling fingers. "This belongs to you now," he said. "It started with courage. Let it remind you that destiny is never given. It's chosen." I closed the box slowly, my heart swelling until it hurt. The coin was no longer just a relic of a stormy night. It was a symbol of everything we had built. Later, as the crowd dispersed, we slipped into his vintage car parked beneath maple trees. The engine rumbled to life, carrying us past the school gates one last time. Families waved, children clutched new books, teachers held bouquets of flowers. It felt like a farewell, but also a promise. This was only the beginning. The city skyline rose ahead, sharp against the evening sky. In my lap lay a flyer I had picked up from the ceremony program, Global Creative Leadership Academy, opening soon. I remembered scribbling that idea on a napkin months ago, Marcus nodding in quiet approval. Now it was real, printed in bold ink, scheduled for launch next spring. He caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Are you ready for the next chapter?" he asked. His tone was soft, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. I looked down at the coin in my hand, felt its weight settle into my bones, and answered with a steady breath, "Yes. Whatever storm comes, I'll face it." He smiled faintly, but there was no triumph in it, only resolve. "Then hold tight. The world is bigger than Elmwood." As the car sped into downtown, my phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen from his chief of staff. "Emergency in Lagos. Community center collapse. Urgent response required." My pulse stuttered. Another test. Another destiny. I turned the screen toward Marcus. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing like a man already calculating the impossible. "Another storm," he murmured. "Another story to rewrite." The coin burned warm in my palm, as though daring me to rise again. Our work here was done. But the world was calling, louder, fiercer, relentless, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that destiny's turning points would never end. If this journey from a chance act of kindness to building brighter futures inspired you, smash the button and let me know which moment moved you most. Subscribe and hit the so you don't miss our next adventure. There's more storms, more dreams, and more destiny to forge. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you found a gold-plated coin that changed your life? Share this video with friends who believe in the power of courage and compassion. Your support fuels every story we tell. Thank you for joining our mission.